Carney told the fascist gangster in the White House, "Fuck off, Canada is moving on." This does not come as a surprise, no, it was in the making for quite some time. Of course, there is the 51st state bullshit, and I truly believe the twice convicted Orange Fellon is still committed to make it happen, one way or the other. But the biggest blow to us Canadians is Trump's ridiculous trade war and his nonsensical import tax, also called tariffs. And because of that tax, many goods exported from Canada to the US are now more expensive for American consumers. Sales numbers are dropping, and consequently, the American importer orders less goods from Canada. Not surprisingly, that hurts our economy. Plus, the constant changing taxes or tariffs structure of import-export internationally makes it almost impossible for companies to plan, to invest and to import and so forth. It does not just affect Canada. But since Trump has put his stupid tax on almost every country on the planet, it significantly inhibits international trade worldwide. And the consequences are felt everywhere. But nowhere as hard as in Trumpistan. And that I call a darn good thing. Over the weekend, the new US employment numbers came out.
Jobs report.
We're going to have tremendous job growth.
That's despite employers adding just 22,000 jobs in August, less than a third of what economists expected. Unemployment rising to 4.3%, the highest in nearly 4 years. And revised numbers for June showing employment actually fell by 13,000 jobs, the first loss in almost 5 years.
What we've seen is an unprecedented surge in uncertainty with regard to trade policy. It creates people to hesitate on making big spending decisions. It also creates firms to hesitate on hiring and making big investments.
Still, Trump insists his trade policy will spark a renaissance in American manufacturing.
Wait till these factories start to open up that are being built all over the country.
But the data shows 78,000 losses in manufacturing since the start of the year, as tariffs drive up the cost of supplies.
So, the demographic that got hit the hardest are white men and black women. The fascist gangster has promised America that his import tax, or tariffs, will bring jobs back to America, but that didn't happen. Also, a lot of government jobs got canned due to the Fellon's policies. But no matter how you slice it, the question, why are the job numbers constantly bad, points directly to Trump's policies, including his import tax. Then, of course, don't forget all the fake deals he made, like the Japan deal, where Japan invests $350 billion, and then the US will only have to pay back 10% in investment and payback. And not unexpectedly, Japan said, "Hold your horses, not so fast. We have not committed to any investment. We discussed perhaps a repayable loan." Sounds a bit different, doesn't it? Trump and his trade buffoons got asked many times for some written confirmation of the deal. A deal. Any deal with Japan. But nothing. And Trump's lies do not build trust among other leaders. As an example, our Canadian Prime Minister Carney, or the Europeans. Another example of how unscrupulously crooked and untrustworthy Trump is Ukraine. The orange gangster constantly gives Putin new timelines, and if they should go by without any results, then, Trump said, there will be serious consequences for Putin, right? But Putin does never agree to anything, never takes a step closer to a peaceful solution. And Trump, well, another timeline. And now we learn Trump rejected to purchase eggs from Ukraine to solve the egg shortage in the US, but secretly bought eggs from Putin. That is what's called a Trump sanction. Or look what just happened in Georgia. An ice raid halted the construction of a major 4.3 billion Hyundai car battery factory in Georgia. This project is part of the biggest investment in the state of Georgia. First, Trump begs South Korea to invest in the US. South Korea does as asked. And of course, in typical Trump's fashion, the orange idiot spits in North Korea's face with a huge ice raid and arrested 475 workers. My understanding is that most of the workers arrested were actually working legally under a US visa, including some people directly involved in the investment oversight. Just think about it. You are a foreign investor coming to the US to invest big into that country and get arrested, together with your employees. A deterrent for any foreign investors. So now, in Trumpistan, no one can do real business without the risk of being arrested. So why would they? And what about that US officials think that they are above the law as long as they follow Trump's wishes? Of course, I have to bring up Trump's most recent atrocity. The killing of perhaps 11 foreigners in a boat on the open sea. US Vice President Shady Vance, not some parking lot attendant, no, the Vice President of Trumpistan, tweeted, "I don't give a shit what you call it," after he got told that killing civilian citizens of another nation without due process is a war crime. What the disaster administration is aiming for and about to achieve is unchecked power. The international terrorist in the House of Horrors approves this killing of Venezuelan citizens with his war on drugs. So what is next? Declaring war on the country of Venezuela? Because apparently that is what Venezuela does. Producing drugs to poison the United States of America. Or could it be that when the US is actively involved in a war, why not with Venezuela, it could be Trump's legal ratification to cancel future elections. Remember when Trump had his aha moment with Zelensky in the Oval Office?
So you say during the war you can't have elections. So let me just say 3.5 years from now. So you mean if we happen to be in a war with somebody, no more elections? Oh, that's good. I wonder what the fake.
You like this idea?
No.
No matter how you slice it, Trump is an authoritarian of the worst kind. Some people, including me, often call him a fascist. But the Orange Gangster is not just a fascist. Why? Because fascism is authoritarian, but is usually driven by extreme nationalism, a desire to create a unified national community, even when it means to violate the rights of every other country around him. But Trump is not just a fascist, because he does not give a rat's ass about America and Americans. He only cares about himself, his own benefit. The more the better. And the country? Hell, the whole world can go to shits, as long as he has as much as he can steal, and stay out of prison doing so. So why is that an issue for Carney as the Prime Minister of Canada? Not only do I think Carney values moral and ethical beliefs, but he also knows that, as history has proven over and over, authoritarians not only destroy their own country, but also severely harm every other country they are friendly with.
It is clear that we cannot count or fully rely on what has been our most valued trading relationship for our prosperity.
I think what it indicates is that the landscape has changed. I think Canadians know that the landscape has changed, that the geopolitics are changing, that the threat landscape has changed.
David McGuinty says Canada's defense plan needs diversification.
We're not only making a diplomatic visit, but we're really interested in diversifying our alliances and our defense investments, and having Minister McGuinty there puts an exclamation point behind that.
You know, we have two choices with President Trump. You roll over or you fight like we've never fought before. And I think all 41 million Canadians would rather fight like they've never fought before. We're going to get through this. There'll be a few bumps in the road, but we're going to make ourselves the most competitive jurisdiction anywhere in the G7 for companies to come here and attract, and or Vic Fideli flying all over the world and attracting new companies. And I had a meeting with Vic the other day, our Minister of Economic Development and Trade, and we saw a list, 3 pages long. And as he said, the pipeline is absolutely jammed with companies that want to come here. And I'll tell you, when you create that environment and conditions for companies to come here, they'll come here. But our number one selling feature are the people. We graduate 70,000 STEM graduates, and some right in this area. But that's not it. We're going to move that up to 100,000. And no U.S. state can say they're graduating 70,000, not to mention 100,000. And I met with a few companies, and the first thing that came out of their mouth, Mayor, was the talent pool here. You can't beat the talent pool, no matter if it's
But now we're working alongside the European Union to combat climate change, to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and to protect, amongst other things, academic and scientific freedoms. In these ways, the world knows the strength of our values. And this partnership, which is in defense and security and economics, really builds those strengths in both our jurisdictions and lives up to our values. So with that, thank you for the partnership. It's not over. As you say, we have dinner, and I know in Europe, dinners are long and they involve a lot of work.
Carney has made it very clear that Canada must get away from the US as far as possible by improving our internal trades, by diversifying our international trades, and by strengthening our culture and security ties with other countries, most importantly the Europeans, Mexico, Australia, and some Asian countries. But that is really nothing new. Carney has talked about his plans a lot over the last few months. But what is new is that Carney publicly, slowly but surely, sends Trump's not-so-subtle messages. Like this one, as a surprise guest at the Toronto International Film Festival, where Carney made his stance towards the orange fascist gangster very clear as he took a not-so-subtle jab at the felon in the White House by saying, "Don't push a Canadian too far."
Having been pushed too far, don't push a Canadian too far. I'm being pushed too far. Pushed too far. Pushed too far by someone who's richer, someone who's more powerful, maybe a little more arrogant. I don't know. I can't think of an analogy. And John would stand up for what's right. And I think this is apt because, John's stories, the stories he tells, the stories that tip platforms, our current times make them all the more precious. We're in a more dangerous, divided, and intolerant world. In Canada, our sovereignty, our identity has come under threat. And when Canadians heard those threats, they channeled their inner John Candy, stood up, elbows up, wrote our own lines.
He reminded not only President Dump, but his entire disaster administration what happens when Canadians put their elbows up. Because of the buy anything but American and don't travel to the US boycott, a boycott that started here in Canada and has now grown internationally, the US travel industry will lose $21 billion in travel-related revenue this year, 2025. According to the U.S. Travel Association.
More Canadians visit the U.S. each year than from any other country. In 2024, 20 million Canadians visited the U.S., generating $20.5 billion in spending. But the flow is slowing. Online travel searches from Canada to the U.S. dropped 50% this spring.
If you look at Canadian drive traffic, it was down nearly 30% in March. Air travel, not as bad. Combined, it was down about 15%.
and you hear it anecdotally, either Canadians staying in Canada for vacation or going to somewhere else like Europe.
Businesses along the northern U.S. border report plunging revenues, vanishing foot traffic, and uncertainty over survival.
When you look at that border traffic, as you said, Michigan, obviously with Windsor and Detroit right there. When you look at New York State, Buffalo, they've taken the brunt of that fall in Canadian travel.
And it's not just Canada. Across the Atlantic, travel to the U.S. from Europe is also dropping.
Sort of early indications from Europe that might be the case too. A core saying that bookings from Europe to the U.S. are down 25% over the summer period.
The pullback is costly. The U.S. is on track to lose $12.5 billion in international visitor spending this year compared with 2024. It's part of a sharp reversal over the past decade, but tensions tied to trade and immigration are making it worse.
It's about $200 billion that these international travelers spend. That's bigger than all of our agricultural exports combined. We need these travelers here, obviously, from a job standpoint, a spending standpoint. When these travelers come, they do nothing more than come, spend their money, and go home and tell their friends and family to do the same thing. It's free money. So discouraging these travelers, letting this deficit grow as we seek to balance the trade deficit, we're only digging a deeper hole. What are we doing?
And it's going to get worse. This will reduce the US GDP by 23.17 billion and lead to more than 230,600 lost jobs. Plus, Carney imposed a 25% tariffs on all US alcohol products. Last year, Canada was the biggest export market for the US. We imported over $435 million worth of wine, 221 million in distilled spirits, and 41 million in beer. So all that money is lost to the US. This Canadian action is threatening over 31,000 American jobs, not Canadians. But in the very same time, the BABA movement, by Anything But America, added 10 billion to our own economy. Combine the Stop Buying American movement with the gigantic impact the Canadian Don't Travel to the US movement has, and you know it kicks ass. American ass. And as any good fighter knows, don't bother punching once, always send a double jab. The very next day, Mark Carney gave a commending speech in Ontario. And here, Carney clearly said, without being funny about it, our Canadian relationship with the United States has been disrupted. And he is not only underlining the importance of buying Canadian, but the need for new, reliable and trustworthy trading and security partners with the rest of the world, while moving as far away as possible from the United States.
The world is changing rapidly. The largest economy, the United States, is fundamentally reshaping all of its trading relationships. And we're moving from an age that lasted decades, an age when free trade was a motor of global economic growth, to a new age, an age of economic nationalism and mercantilism. The U.S. tariff rate is now the highest it has been since the Great Depression in the 1930s. And these tariffs are being applied to all countries on nearly all goods. And the changes in U.S. policy go beyond tariffs. Countries now must, in effect, buy access to the world's largest economy through investments, through unilateral trade liberalization, and policy changes in their home markets. And all the while, the transformation of global trade is occurring against a backdrop of wider economic disruptions, of geopolitical realignment, of AI and other technological transformations, and the necessity, the imperative of a shift to a greener economy. What's going on is not a transition, it's a rupture. And its effect will be profound. Workers displaced from their jobs. Supply chains that have existed for decades disrupted. Companies forced to change where they find their materials and their products. And all of this is causing an extreme uncertainty that's holding back massive amounts of investment and, as a consequence, slowing economic growth. Just this morning, we see the impact in today's employment report in Canada, with unemployment rising across regions and sectors.
This makes decisive action crucial. To be clear, we're in a position right now where Canada currently has the best trading deal with the United States of any of their trading partners. 85% of our trade with the U.S. is now tariff-free. We have the lowest tariff rate of any country in the world. But we also know that given all those changes, given the rupture, we can't rely on our most important trading partner as we once did. So our relationship with the United States, so essential for so many industries, was once one of our greatest strengths, and in many cases, in certain sectors, has become a vulnerability. This disruption calls for a bold new approach. And given, as Minister Joly said, given that we can't control what other nations do, Canada's government is focused on what we can control. And that means building our strength at home, building Canada strong. That means giving our workers and our companies the tools they need, retraining our workers, transforming our strategic sectors, creating entirely new industries, and being our own best customer by buying Canadian. And to these ends, our new government is embarking on an ambitious plan to secure a new era of prosperity out of this age of adversity. Our new industrial strategy will help transform our economy from being overly reliant on the United States to one that is more resilient to global shocks. A new economy that's built on the solid foundation of Canadian industries, Canadian workers, and it's bolstered by diverse international trading partners. To drive this transformation, we've just launched the Major Projects Office. Its job is to fast-track major nation-building projects. Shortly, we will launch Build Canada Homes, just later this month. And that's a new government entity that will help double the pace of housing construction over the next decade, while creating a new housing industry using Canadian technology, Canadian workers, and Canadian lumber. This fall, we will unveil a new defense industrial strategy so that our defense estimates, which will be enormous, our defense investments support the growth of Canadian industries and create Canadian jobs and careers. We'll begin this month our negotiations of a new defense and security partnership with the European Union. And we launched a new trade diversification strategy to develop new export markets. We will soon also release our climate competitiveness strategy to position Canada as a leader in decarbonization. The third major thing we're announcing today is a comprehensive Buy Canadian policy. We are on a mission to build Canada strong through major infrastructure projects, through that modern defense industry, and by building millions of more homes. In that mission, the public sector can serve as an anchor customer for Canadian businesses. But for that to happen, a lot of things must change. At present, Canada's public procurement is following outdated rules of that old free trade order that no longer exists. For years, we've been buying as a government significantly from foreign suppliers for short-term gain. Now we need to use government procurement using Canadian taxpayer dollars to spur Canadian businesses for longer-term prosperity. To support Canadian industries, the government's introducing a new comprehensive Buy Canadian policy that will move from best efforts to buy Canadian to a clear obligation to do so.
And when he said buying from other countries, that usually meant buying from the US, and that is over. It's over. Bye-bye Trumpistan. Here our Prime Minister, who in contrast to the fascist gangster in the House of Horrors, is actually a leader with empathy, answers a question about Canada standing up with Ukraine against Putin and his threat of going after everyone helping the Ukraine. In the process, Carney also puts, once again, the orange idiot in his place.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Good morning, Minister Joly. Prime Minister, you and your office announced yesterday a willingness to support Ukraine with military scalable assistance, military assistance to support a lasting peace in the country. But now we've heard the Russian president reject such security assurances. He says that any troops, foreign troops in Ukraine would be a legitimate target. Does that change at all your stance that was announced yesterday?
Look, President Putin is the cause of this war. He has not yet come to terms with the need for peace. We need to maintain, through the coalition of the willing, other allies, the Ukrainian armed forces need to maintain maximum pressure. That pressure has several aspects. First, obviously the Ukrainian forces themselves and ensuring that they are appropriately armed in their valiant fight, and Canada has just reinforced that, as have other allies. Secondly, that pressure is economic. Sanctions, we have put in place sanctions on more than 3,000 individuals, tightening the oil price cap and other sanctions. The next wave of sanctions is being prepared amongst allies, and it will come, and these are having an effect on Russia's economy, and we need to keep there. The third aspect is to make clear that Ukraine will be supported when peace comes, when there is a cessation of hostility. First and foremost, that's the Ukrainian army, but yes, it will need to be backed up by robust and credible security guarantees. That's why Canada is in the coalition of the willing, and through part of that. Mr. Putin is the cause of this war. He's the reason for the killing. He is not going to dictate the terms of the peace.
Yep, Mark Carney is what the Orange Fellon never was and never will be, a strong leader who is being accepted at home and internationally as such. I truly think our government under Mark Carney exceptional leadership is doing exactly what they need to do. Not only to ensure Canadian prosperity, but also to elevate our prosperity to levels we have never dreamt of. All the while the US is shrinking in isolation. Russia, North Korea, anyone? We are not naive. We know it will not be done overnight, but we know we will get there. I just hope that our fellow Canadians in Alberta and Saskatchewan get their head out of their own ass and for once realize that a province can only do as good as the country is doing. By limiting Canada, delimiting themselves. So guys, smarten up and get on the train. And if I may add, that you guys, Alberta and Saskatchewan, put American booze back on the shelves is a disgrace. What about elbows up? Huh? Guys, come on. Please let me know what you think, how the Carney government is doing in the comments below. I read every thought and story you share. For more real news, facts and viewpoints to counterbalance the demagogic of the right-wing media, please like and subscribe. It goes a long way to help the channel. Till next time, I'm Wilfried Lemkuler from Europe Curious.